What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my comprehensive guide on Attuned Hector, the builds that you can run on him, the teammates that you should be running, and also how you can optimally use his fodder. And I know I'm as early to this as Athos joining you in FE7. I think that Attuned Hector is one of the best armors in the game still, even after we have got stuff like Duo Rhea. And he's also present in the Divine Code, so you can get him and then refresh your inheritance. And he's also going to be appearing on several of the banners in the future as an attuned unit, so even when he falls off as a unit, he can still act as a duplicator for a lot of the armor exclusive skills. So here he is as a 207 BST sword armor. He does have Fellowship Blade as his preferred weapon. This does have Slaying built in it, and just like any modern unit, he does give the support in both player phase and enemy phase to himself and the allies in 2 spaces. So he can buff up himself and those allies for +6 defense and resistance, the bulwark status which can obstruct the enemies, and this is extremely helpful in a metagame where we have got extremely high mobility units, so this can block your enemies from sniping your backline units, and this is really good for a frontliner and for any kind of other unit who may be on the front line even if they're not Hector. So the fact that he gives this out to the other units is extremely helpful, and if you use Attuned Chimera quite a lot, then you know that she's got the bulwark effect built in her weapon. And if you can give this out to the other allies, then it can help you in several situations in competitive game modes. He also gives you the Null Panic, which does help as Larather is a really common unit and he does spread panic quite easily. So this Null Panic can help you against that. And then if he's within 3 spaces of an ally, then he's going to be getting the extra effects out of this weapon. So he can debuff the foe for -6 and 20% of his visible defense. And usually this is going to be averaging around 17 to 18 debuff. And then he has got Treachery Plus built in his weapon. The reason why I say this is Treachery Plus is because it can also count the visible buffs with the allies that you have got in your proximity. So even if you face any kind of unit with a dull skill or a lull skill, you're still going to be able to take the advantage out of the visible buffs by counting it from the allies, and then you're going to be getting the true damage. So the treachery status that we have got basically gives you true damage depending on the visible buffs that you have got. So if you've got Omni +6 buffs, then you're going to be getting 24 true damage, which is quite good actually, and that's one of the reasons why Attuned Hector is a really good unit, because he can hit extremely hard and retaliate back hard. And now that we have got Emblem Erica Ring, and because I'm late to this review, I do have the retrospective of using him with the Emblem Erica Ring, and that allows him to basically kill many of the miracle nukes because his damage output is there to the point where he can bring down the enemy units to their miracle and then kill them with his brave attack from Emblem Erica Ring. So it certainly has the applications on him, and then he has got flat damage reduction based on 50% of the X. So if you're getting 24 true damage, then you're going to be getting half of that as the flat damage reduction, so it is going to be around 12 points, even though he's not the bulkiest armor from the selection that we've got. But as I said, the utility definitely carries him, and then he has got the guard effect in his weapon, so sometimes this can be helpful. I've found against like attuned Micaiahs and many of the units that may not have null guard, so it can be a gatekeeping tool basically. But against any kind of half decent nuke nowadays, they're going to be having null guard or some kind of preempt pulse, which is going to be not making this matter too much, but in some matchups it can be helpful. And then he has got Distant Counter Echo as his attune skill. This is easily one of the best attune skills that we have got for many of the mixed phase units, especially if you're a flyer or a cavalier, because the choices are not all that much for you. But if you're an infantry, then of course you have got Time Pulse Echo, Tempo Echo, Lull Echo, and a lot of other tanking type of attune skills like Null Counter Disrupt Echo. So this is mainly going to be used on the armors, on the cavaliers, and the flyers a lot of the times. And on armors and cavaliers, especially right now as of making this video, they do not have as many options as flyers, and certainly not as much as the infantry units. And this can help you basically compress the effects on those units, because you will not have to use something like Distant Counter Slotty skill or Fortifications, or even Distant Counter Melee or Dragon Sacred CL, and you can basically get this effect in the attune slot. But on many of the modern armors, they do have their preferred skill, so you cannot use their preferred skill along with an attune skill like this. So there is the limitation which you have to keep in mind. Then he has got Oath to Ostia as his preferred slotty skill. This does have the stone terrain, and you can see the range of it here, and it does give you plus 5 HP, which isn't really seen much. So this is basically a super boost skill, and that kind of extra bulk can really come in handy because usually the HP is not the stat that gets power crept that much in this game. You're going to be finding the highest HP units from the old times, and his name is Arden. And the extra HP can always be helpful because it does translate into the bulk, and the stone terrain does give you and your allies on that terrain the plus 6 defense and resistance in combat, and it also gives you the flat 10 damage reduction against the foe specials, and it also gives you the 50% AoE damage reduction, and it's a really great tool to be stacking up with the AoE damage reduction on units like the Duo Rhea. So this can help you against a lot of the AoE nukes like Emblem Sigurd, and this is also really helpful now that we have got young Camilla because she can inflict the start of the turn haste terrain, and because the stone terrain is going to be active after you act, you're able to replace the haste tiles with your stone tiles. So I find that to be incredibly helpful as we get more and more terrains, and if we get more at start of turn effects like young Camilla. So that's also a reason why I prefer him many times over the other saviors. And this is going to be active from turn 1 of your enemy phase in Aether Raids defense, and that's the reason why you're going to be seeing Attuned Hector so much in the higher tiers of Vault of Heaven, because he not only prevents the AoE damage, but he also acts as a really annoying unit who does have the weapon strangle advantage against Emblem Lyn. Now that we've got Emblem Erica, if you do not have the bulk of Emblem Ike Ring, then you are able to blast through the miracle, as I said, or you can choose to ignore the Emblem Erica ring and focus on your bulk with the Ike ring. So he has got the options, and then he can debuff the enemy for -10 attack and defense. He also gets the passive 50% damage reduction piercing, so this can help you against the pierceable damage reduction, and having some damage reduction piercing is always going to be helpful a bit. And then he has got the Pre-Impulse -2 cooldown, and this is the Lagoo style of Pre-Impulse. By this I mean that it is going to be given to you before foe's first attack and not your own first attack, so it's defensive in nature, and this can help you with Armored Beacon with the defensive specials, and this is something that you see on Lagoo's friend, and we also have this in Elamine's remix. Then it's also there in Divinely Inspiring, so it's not as common as the offensive pre-impulse that we have got, so I think it is important to clarify that. And then he has got Armored Beacon, which is going to be the special of choice for many of the armors, especially against the shield fighter killers like Attuned Alm. So running Aegis is going to be making you a bit of a duck against that, and we do not have as many ranged shield fighter slayers as we have got them at the melee range, so it's a bit harder for the near saviors with Pavis than it is for Aegis far saviors in my opinion, because the near saviors have to deal with Valentine Edelgard, Legendary, Ira, and we're likely going to be getting more units who can just get through the shield fighter saviors. So I kind of do prefer the style of running Wily Fighter or Slick Fighter with Armored Beacon or Armored Blaze on a lot of the armors nowadays. But as I said, the far saviors right now as of making this video can afford to still run the Shield Fighter Aegis build, and mainly they will have to worry about Attuned Alm. So this does give you the unpierceable damage reduction, but it is only going to be there for the ranged foes. It is not like Sturdy Beast, which gives you the damage reduction against the melee foes. So if you want to tank the melee enemies, then you will need to run Armored Blaze, and the way you can try and make the full use out of something like Armored Beacon is by running his default Slotsy skill in attack defense twin far save, and it lets you trigger the damage reduction from your offensive damage reduction specials twice in a single round of combat. This means that the unpierceable damage reduction from Armored Beacon is given to you twice in that same combat. So there is going to be an opportunity cost for many of the dragons and beast units to choose between higher ground, lower ground, or a twin save scale, but for the melee armors it is really easy. If you have Shield Fighter, go with the Briar save scale, and if you have Wily Fighter, Slick Fighter, then go with the twin save scales, which can let you trigger the damage reduction twice. And this is going to be applying to Sturdy Beast and stuff like Dragon's Roar and Dragon Flame, and this is not going to be applying to the Emblem Ike Ring. This is only going to be for the special and not for any kind of emblem ring that we may get even in the future for the, melee units equivalent to Emblem Ike. So that is something you need to keep in mind. And Wily Fighter 4 is easily one of the best thought piece skills for many of these armors because it is completely functionally superior to reopening. It gives you the true damage based on 20% of your defense and also gives you the flat damage reduction, which is quite important for tanking. And then it gives you the guaranteed follow-up attack and also gives you -5 attack debuff on the foe. Slick Fighter and Wily Fighter 4 are basically the same skills, but they differ with its final effect. So Slick Fighter gives you the null debuffs effect, which can make you immune to any kind of visible debuffs, and Wily Fighter gives you the dull effect, which ignores the visible buffs of the enemies. And we have got the sacred seals of both of these skills, so it's really all about mixing and matching. But in my personal opinion, I do prefer Slick Fighter 4 because I think that the dull effect is a lot easily outsourceable because we have got it in the Grail pool. Especially with Marnie being a staple free-to-play unit, and this is also given to you by even the premium meta units like Legendary Ira as a status and also Legendary Sakura with her call to serve. So if you're trying to use those kinds of premium units, then you already have the status. So Slick Fighter is going to be giving you a bit more value because at this moment, Dull All is a bit easily outsourceable, but again, if you do not have resources, then these skills are pretty much the same, and there are more prerequisite fodder units that have got Slick Fighter 3, which can help you inherit the skill compared to Wily Fighter 3, which is only there on Ascended Eden, and while she can appear in the arena tickets, she is the only unit who has got the prerequisite. Now let's talk about how you can optimize your rearmed and attuned inherits. I do get this question asked quite a lot, and I think this is a good opportunity to discuss it. So the main way of doing it is planning the prerequisite fodder, which units have got the prerequisite skills so that you can, get the most amount of value in your 5 inherits. So now the question arises that can you try and pass a skill through the attuned or rearmed units, and if they also need it, like having Shield Fighter on Attuned Hector does make sense, but if I give Crystalline Water to Attuned Ivy, then it's mainly going to be there for the duping. It's not going to be something that I'm going to be using on, that rearmed unit because she has got a preferred slotty skill. So you have to consider that if it's worth duping or not, or if it's a skill that you can easily get the prerequisite fodder for. Now, I know I have said that you can try and optimize, but if you try and hyper optimize and try and inherit all of the skills, just for the sake of it, then I see that many people pretty much have the analysis paralysis, and this is something I've seen with myself too. So you're basically going to be sitting on the fodder without making use of it, and then it's going to be getting outdated after couple of years, and then you would regret it because you were not able to get the fun out of those skills. So even if you don't have prerequisite fodder, and if the priority lies on your favorite unit and upgrading them, then you can still go ahead and inherit those skills. Now, many people are going to be lacking the prerequisite fodder for the skills of Attuned Hector and a Safe Skill and Wily Fighter. And if you have multiple Hectors and if you can afford it, and if that armor unit or that unit needs that skill really badly, then you can still try and use the inherits even if you're not able to get all of the skills. So it depends on case to case basis, and having any kind of extra copy of a rearmed or attuned unit means that you've got the free pass of duplicating a rare skill that you can use on that unit themselves and also give it to any other unit. So it can basically be a medium of passing that skill to your favorite. And I also get asked, if you are plus and merging an attuned or rearmed unit, then what should you do? And my answer is always going to be to go the slower pace because, you could try and use them in arena, but I think that just for the sake of using their inherits, you're just going to be wasting that fodder on the units in your barracks who may not even need it. And by going on a slower pace, you can try have more choice of the skills that you can inherit and duplicate in the future. And it's the same concept as having a hammer and then everything looking like a nail to you. So I do think that it should not be done just for the sake of it. And the movement type and the weapon types of these attuned and rearmed units can make you have a skill set that you can inherit at the same time for many of the units and build them right away. And now you would have to consider the skills that take 4 inherit slots like Legoose Friend 4, Shadow Shift, Speed Taker. We do not even have the prerequisite fodder for Gambit, and that skill isn't even that good anymore. So these kinds of skills are always limited by the prerequisite fodder, and you're not going to be able to duplicate them. So you would have to consider if you want to duplicate them or not, or you want to inherit that to your favorite unit that you're trying to give this inheritance to. And for Attuned Hector, these are the main skills that I do find worth duplicating as of this moment. Sometimes if you do not have the prerequisite fodder and if you've got extra, Nidhogre, then I would just go ahead and inherit Slick Fighter on the other units, because the prerequisite fodder being there in your barracks means that you can get more value out of the inherits. And if you do not have any of the Slick Fighter, Wily Fighter or anything, then I guess you could make do with reopening, but it's only there if you do not have the prerequisite for the other skills. And same goes for the other versions of the Twin Save skill. And there are a couple of good skills like Primordial Boost and also Stronghold, which are good on many of the armors, and that can also have good synergy with the Wily Fighter skill, because Wily Fighter can ignore the visible buffs, whereas Stronghold can protect you against the debuffs with its cleansing. For most of the armor, Shield Fighter and the Twin Save skills can be a big reason why you're going to be duplicating the fodder, because you can give both of these saves to a unit, give the distant counter echo, and then also give another skill to them, and maybe a special, so that's something you can try and optimize. And as I said, the main prerequisite fodder for Attuned Hector is kind of limited, because only Ascended Eden has got Wily Fighter 3, and only for Mortis and Valentine Robin has got the attack defense version 3 of the Far Save, which is needed to get the Twin Save skill and other skills at the same time. So I did not have the fodder on my free-to-play account, and I'm still going to be making use of it, but on my main account for some inherits I did have the prerequisite fodder, as you saw. So I chose to use that prerequisite fodder when I could get the value out of those skills on a certain unit. And when I was giving the fodder from my Attuned Hector to my Brave Ephraim, I knew for a fact that I was not going to be requiring the Twin Far Save skill, because I'm never really going to be using my Brave Ephraim to Far Save. He simply is not going to be functioning at that level compared to a lot of armors, and mainly his calling is going to be for the near save matchups. Now let's go over some of the examples where you can make use of the fodder of Attuned Hector, and the main use case is of course going to be Marnie. So because of the Dalol effect present in her weapon, she does prefer having Slick Fighter, but it's there on Nidhoggers, which are a lot harder to get, and you cannot guaranteed spark them, unless you sparked on the Hero Rises banner, of course. So you can still make do with Wily Fighter 4. As I said, they are basically the same skills, and a bit of overlap doesn't hurt you when the main reason of running this skill is the flat damage reduction. So if you do not have Slick Fighter, then it's something you can run, and you also get the Twin Far Save skill and Distant Counter Echo. With this kind of build, Stronghold does help you against the debuffs, but if you're running Slick Fighter, which protects you against the debuffs, then you can go with the Tier 4 boost skill. So again, mix and match with the fodder that you've got, and it can also be useful for any kind of Far Savior. And I have given this to my own Brave Hector that's present at Plus and Merge. So this is a build that I'm running because Distant Counter Echo just means that you can have other slotty skills which can give you the extra stats, and you don't really need to run many of the preferred skills sometimes, because letting go of it for an attuned skill can be beneficial. Dragon Flame is also an option for many of the defense-based dragons, and they are going to be lacking Wily Fighter 4 if they're slow, and Distant Counter Echo does mean that they get to run a different Seeker CL instead of running Distant Counter Dragon, and the compression can be helpful. But you can also run Deflect Missile, because against many of the physical threats, they only have 50% damage reduction piercing, so you still get the 40% piercing out of them, and many times they might be like Yunakas and run Windsweep, so you're not going to be able to retaliate back to them. So in that scenario, Deflect Missile does prove to be useful, and it can also be run on many of the units that already have a preferred special like Winter Duo Pilot, so they're going to be using Supreme Heaven, and a Twin Save skill can upgrade their playstyle, and Wily Fighter is simply superior to Weaving Fighter because its damage reduction is flat in nature. It's not pierceable like Weaving Fighter. As I said, for the melee armor, it depends on if they're a dragon or a beast or not, because you're able to run lower ground or higher ground depending on the fodder you've got. And if they're a melee armor, then if you're running shield fighter, then go with Briar scales most of the time. And if you're not running shield fighter, then the twin save scale is going to be useful a lot of the times. But for the range armors, they do not have the luxury of having to choose between shield fighter or not. They simply have the option of running the twin save scale. They do not have the option of higher ground or lower ground, and this is the only option that they've got right now to maximize on their bulk. Let's take a look at some of the good allies with Attuned Hector that can make use of the power of friendship. So of course, using a good near savior or far savior that can pair well with him is going to be working out great. Duo Rhea gives him Miracle, which is amazing, and she also gives out more flat damage reduction as the support. Nidhogger, on the other hand, do give out the dosage status, which helps you with the stat stacking, and Didu can also make use of it because he can take advantage of the stone terrain of Hector to basically get the distant counter effect right from the start. I know it does overlap a bit, but Didu is basically going to be a specialist at the near saving matchups compared to Attuned Hector, who is a lot better at the far saving because he has got the modern stat spread unlike Didu. And Didu does have good refine, and that's why I mention him, because he is a viable option if you do not have other near saviors that I mentioned here. And Winter for Mortis can also be a really good far savior when it comes to the bulk, because he has got the preferred weapon, the slotted skill, which can end the action, and then shield fighters. So if you go with the near saving with Attuned Hector, I think he can make for a good far save partner. But Duo Rhea is just so flexible that she can work as a near or a far savior, and that's one of her advantages and why I've put her in the first slot. And then if we're talking about increasing the tanking potential of Attuned Hector, then stacking up the flat damage reduction using Seteth or Divine Nectar is going to be helpful. The extra action out of Divine Nectar can also be helpful for just positioning yourself better, and it also gives you the pre-combat healing. Attuned Micaiah cleanses you, gives you the Breath of Life support if she runs that, and also lets you warp, so that's amazing. Elamine also gives you the flat damage reduction, and Spring Veil also gives it, but it's just that you will need to be in the proximity of her, and she only works in 2 spaces compared to someone like Seteth who can work in 3 spaces, and that way you can avoid the force assigned decoy of Lerathar many times. So Veil does have that limitation, but still she can provide you with some good support with her Slotsy skill. And then you've got the tech options that can help you win certain matchups, and these units do pair depending on the situation. So if you're not running Emblem Erica Ring, then Desert Marissa can give you the brave hits, but if you're running the Emblem Erica Ring, then you should be running a support unit that can give you the flat damage reduction instead. Duo Winter Alear is an amazing combo with Attuned Hector, especially in summoner duels, because Winter Alear can be bulky and he kills the enemy units with his power without requiring the Emblem Erica Ring. So he can hit and run as a melee nuke, and then he can protect himself against the AoE damage using the stone terrain of Attuned Hector. And Divinely Inspiring is also helpful to Attuned Hector. Spring Plumeria can give you more true damage, and that can be deadly with the firepower of Attuned Hector and the visible buffs that you've got. Istra Felicia is the only unit that we have got right now who can give you the null counter disrupt as a supportive effect, and it's gonna be a bit hard to slot her in, but if you want to get the null counter disrupt effect on your Attuned Hector, then she can be a tech option. And I also love Brave Alphonse with Attuned Hector because he can make him a ticking time bomb with the great talent, so the longer the enemy takes to engage in the combat, the harder it is going to be to kill Attuned Hector with the great talent support that Alphonse can provide. And because of fortifications, Alphonse also functions as a frontliner against the AoE threat like Emblem Sigurd, and he also gets the distant counter effect right away. On a budget, you can try and run Emblem Ike Ring. That is going to be giving you more unpierceable damage reduction against the ranged enemies. And as I said, the twin save skills do not let you trigger the damage reduction from Emblem Ike Ring twice. It only does that for Armored Beacon. And Hardy Bearing does help you against a lot of the Desperation nukes because there's Emblem Lin, then there are the Firestorm Dancers. There's also the Paranoia status of Brave Bernie, which now does get used quite a lot with Emblem Erica because it also acts as a Vantage effect. So there are a couple of Desperation effects out there which you would have to try and counter with the Sacred Seal. So usually you're going to be seeing the seal. You can give the fodder from Realm Thiazi to Attuned Hector, and she is also there in the Divine Codes. And that is also going to be a popular path, but she is not going to be on his Divine Codes path. But it is something you can do to make him function as a near savior and also duplicate the fodder of Thiazi, except for the Arcane Giant Axe. That's not something you can duplicate with Attuned Hector, and it has to be inherited from the rearmed unit, but her fodder is helpful for many of the near saviors. It doesn't have to be an axe armor to get the benefit out of Arcane Giant Axe. The other weapon type armors can also make use of the near save fodder along with Wily Fighter 4. And as a near savior, there isn't really going to be a big reason to run Emblem Ike Ring, so you can run Emblem Erica Ring and get the Brave effect and basically bust through the miracle effects of many of the units. The Hardy Bearing Sacred Seal does help because we do have young Camilla with the trample skill, and if you let her initiate combat and just hit you consecutive times, then it is going to be a lot of trouble. So that's why it does help even on the melee matchups. But of course you would have to choose between giving Hardy Bearing to your Far Savior or your Near Savior. You can also run him as a Far Savior with the Emblem Erica Ring, and Reposition Gate does give you better positioning with the Canto that can help you just move yourself after repositioning someone. And if you're running Emblem Erica Ring, then you can also supplement the damage reduction through the allies, as you're going to be focusing on the brave attacks. If you choose to redeem his Divine Codes and get another copy of him, then in that same path you also get Winter for Mortis, and you can basically just give his fodder to Attuned Hector if you have him, which you will because he is a Hero Rises winner. So that's why you can try and duplicate Shield Fighter and Briar Far Save. And it's also helpful on Hector himself because he can run Emblem Marthring with Aegis, and Shield Fighter is going to be helpful for many of the far saving matchups except for Attuned Alm, and Wily Fighter could be run as the Sacred Seal to still get the buff neutralization and also the guaranteed follow-up attack. And then you can also try and maximize his near saving potential by running Deflect Melee. So the reason why I really like Deflect Melee on many of the near saviors is because it helps you against both Emblem Erica and also against young Camilla. Whereas if you just run Hardy Bearing, then it does not do much against an Emblem Erica who does not have the Desperation effect or status basically. So it's mainly there for young Camilla, but Deflect Melee can help you against both of those units with the good support if you can provide that, because you're able to get the damage reduction against the brave hits and also against the desperation hits. And if the Hardy Bearing is on your Far Savior for the Emblem Lin matchup and for many of the desperation nukes, then Deflect Melee is going to be there to give you the fighting chance against those two big melee nukes that we've got in this metagame. Finally, at the end, you're going to be seeing this kind of build on many of the higher tier Aether Raids and Summoner duels, Attuned Hectors, and this is going to be maximizing his survival, because in those game modes, you cannot afford to lose your Far Savior, because the moment your Far Savior dies, it is going to be becoming a shooting gallery with the Lin Ring and Emblem Lin herself. So that's why focusing on your survival is going to be helpful in Aether Raids defense and also in Summoner duels. So with Aegis, Shield Fighter, and Deflect Missile, it is going to be helping you a ton against the ranged matchups, because even when you have not got the Hardy Bearing Sacred Seal, Deflect Missile, as I said, does help you against a lot of the meta physical threats that we have got, and it does give you the 40% damage reduction even if they pierce your damage reduction by half. And a lot of them only do it by half, they do not completely negate it. But of course the main weakness of this build is going to be Attuned Alm, and he is going to be able to kill him, but still you're going to be forcing your opponent to use that one unit that can have an advantage against a far safe Shield Fighter Hector. Of course, it's still possible to kill this kind of Shield Fighter Hector with other nukes, but mainly Attuned Alm does it a lot more easily. And with this build, you also get a good amount of firepower, because keep in mind that Attuned Hector does have a lot of true damage, and with the Briar Far Save, you're able to reflect a bit more damage, and it also gives you the flat damage reduction on the first hit. So it gives you the survival with a Shield Fighter build while also helping you kill the enemy. And the Emblem Marthring is going to be needed here for Aegis, and I would say that it's a lot better to run that on a Far Savior, than on a shield fighter near savior because of the reasons I've mentioned before. And if you cannot run Emblem Marth Ring on him, then do run Sacred Cowl with the Ike Ring so that you can spread out your damage reduction. But Marth Ring with Aegis is going to be giving you more damage reduction and again the max survival chance. But this kind of shield fighter build also has the weakness against the potent hits, which you can have on many of the units. Thankfully for Hector, he does have a pretty good matchup against the main potent hit range enemy in Emblem Lyn, and that still helps him function as a really good far savior, especially when backed up by Hathrin and Duo Rhea in Aether Raids defense, because he just gets the miracle effect, the divine nectar, the flat damage reduction and everything. And this build of course does not mean he's gonna be some kind of immortal god. I don't think that can exist in this kind of fast-paced metagame where we have got such insane nukes, but again, this is mainly for doubling down on his survival. Thank you so much for your patience, and I really want to thank my YouTube members. And you can click the link on the screen right now to check out the full comprehensive guide for getting the best units in Binding Worlds. Make sure to subscribe and also hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes are about as fast as me with this video and also Attuned Hector. So with that, so let's see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.